On this week's episode of Legal Marketing Station with Jason, we have a very special guest. He is the owner of Business of Law Strategist and one of the original founders of law.com in the early 2000s. We are going to dive into his journey and, of course, what is working in the legal marketing industry today. So hold on and we'll be right back here with Paul Ward.
Welcome to Legal Marketing Station with Jason, with your host, Jason Craver, co-owner of Telegenic Marketing and co-creator of Local Legal Authorities, the best exclusive legal directory. Each week, we bring you attorney, legal vendor, and legal marketer interviews, along with marketing tips with tutorials you can implement. Pick up the most up-to-date marketing methods and techniques in the legal industry that will get your business results. Now back to this week's show with your host, Jason Craver.
We're going to enter a poll here, and Paul, kind of just tell the audience really how you got started originally in the legal marketing industry.
Sure, Jason. Hey, and first of all, thanks for having me. This is an honor because you're the next generation of legal marketers. So it's good to be here. Yeah, I stumbled into it. I was a television broadcaster and took a job in PR, and the company that I worked for got sued a lot, and I got to know the lawyers really well. And one day I was on TV explaining about the Aaron Brockovich case and about how my employer wasn't really guilty for poisoning all those people in California. And some lawyers saw me on TV and said, "Hey, I think I could do marketing for lawyers." And it was really, that simple. It all started from there.
The natural intros are the best intros into certain industries. And obviously you have stayed in this industry, so it was a good intro for you. So could you give us a little bit more of what was your first initial steps to actually get foot in the legal marketing industry?
Sure. Well, it sort of migrated because initially I was more communications and PR for a big law firm. I think the key to any successful marketing is really understanding the business. This particular firm that brought me in, they'd fired all their marketing people in the past. Like nobody lasted more than 18 months. I didn't know that when I took the job. And they decided that the reason that they'd fired everybody is because nobody ever took the time to understand the business. And so they educated me about, how law firms work, how billable time works, how they, the stresses that they're under, the way that they count the money, all that stuff, which was just super valuable. And I think that's one of the things that I kind of bring to the table today is that I was taught by, one of the best. The thing that has kept me around it is that law firms touch all areas of commerce. Like I do a lot of work with Davis Miles, for example, in Tempe, Arizona, and they do personal injury, they do accident law, they sell businesses, they do bankruptcy, they do divorce, and marketing to each of those segments is very different. So it kind of feels like you're in an agency every day. You're not doing the same thing. And the people that do it, kind of like on a uniform basis, one size fits all, typically don't last or they just suck. So
I agree on that. Those are the people that potentially create the bad impression in the legal marketing industry for us.
Exactly.
And that is the hard part there. But that is a very cool natural progression. And yes, like you said, each practice area is heavily different the way you market it. And that is what has been super fun learning in this industry the past 5 years of how intellectual property is 100% completely different than personal injury. And the minds that you're working with behind those practices too are completely different, which is just very unique how you can have something different even though you're in legal marketing every single day.
For sure. And where you are, and I think where the interview is going is, the founding of law.com was just at the beginning. I mean, when you started out, it was very hard to measure and prove that the marketing was working. People had good feeling. Like for example, we put an ad on public radio and it would just mention the name of the firm. And, the very sophisticated lawyers in San Francisco would be driving into work over the Golden Gate Bridge, and they'd hear that and they'd be like, oh, we are really getting out there. And then the other ones would be, okay, you're spending my money on PBS, but what am I getting? Do I get any clients? Well, I don't know, probably, And so there was none of the measurement that we have now where we get it right down to an exact science of like, how much does it cost per click? How much does it cost per phone call? And that's what's cool about how the digital component of marketing has evolved.
I agree on that 100%. It is not the hope and pray marketing is what I would say.
Although I still pray a lot, Jason.
Exactly. Yes. Everything we do behind SEO, we still pray that it's going to produce and work. But
right.
Yes, it's not that typical billboard. We have 100 billboards out there. We don't really know which one produces a result for us type of mindset.
Right.
Well, yes, that is cool in the Law.com Foundation. And yeah, we're about to go a little bit more heavier into that on some of these next questions. First, though, I wanted you to just tell the audience what you're currently doing for marketing. So you mentioned Davis Miles, but I know you also have your company that's contracted with Davis Miles. So could you give us a little background of what your company does?
Sure. Yeah. So over the years, I've kind of developed a mix of like 3 or 4 things, and I always tell attorneys to do this, to try to have a mix of 3 or 4 practice areas within your practice focus, because that way you've got a balanced portfolio. If one goes down, the other one maybe is firing, et cetera. And so, I've kind of focused on, marketing, everything from, the websites to the sponsorships to the SEO to the pay-per-click. Not that I do all those myself, but I've hired you before, hiring people to help me get those things done. So that the marketing, and then an individual coaching with the lawyers on their own business plans, coaching at an executive level, what's the firm's business plan. And then I've also done a fair amount of recruiting, especially in the Phoenix market, because, we started that company 20 years ago in Phoenix. So I have a lot of contacts over the years here. So a lot of times lawyers will let me know if they're going to make a move, and I can try to help place them. And then there's this sort of whole innovation, digital transformation. A lot of law firms are still trying to figure out how to be more efficient. It's one thing to get them a bunch more work. It's another thing, like, can they do the work? Can they do it profitably, et cetera? And spent a lot of time in Colorado, my last firm, looking at that and increasing profitability and not just top line revenue. So those are sort of the things that I focus on.
That's awesome. Yeah, top line revenue and increasing that is key. And that's why I feel like a lot of this software is coming into play for these attorneys, really speed running this process for them and telling them they don't have to look up in books for every single thing that they're looking for.
Exactly.
But it is the hardest market to transition from paper to digital in my eyes. And it's obviously been going faster, but I think the legal industry needs to speed up even more in the next few years, and everybody needs to adapt digital.
Yeah, it's been very, very resilient and resistant to change. And I think it's just because of the revenue models. I think in places where lawyers and law firms have figured out how to make money on volume and how to make money on efficiency, and when they're charging flat fees or what have you, I think you see some real innovation happening. I think where there's a disincentive to do it, sometimes the deals are so big that people on each side don't care, and there's not really a compelling reason to make the change. And so it's all economic driven. But the people I know who've done it, I work with a divorce lawyer who has modernized his whole document process, and he's one of the most successful divorce lawyers I've ever met, because he can operate at a very efficient level. So his focus is on his clients and not, where was that document? Where was that clause? Where was that? He's got all of that down. So he's got laser focus. Subsequently, he can do more work, he can make more money, and et cetera. So people that I know who have done it have ended up being very, very successful. But you're right, it's It's a slow process, and there are billions of dollars now being invested in software. I mean, there are legal tech funds that only invest in legal technology. There are alternative service providers who are challenging, at the fringes, but there's still a long way to go.
I agree. Yeah, I was just checking out a lot of the 2021 Legal Technology Awards happened like a month ago. The amount of softwares that were part of the selection process for that was mind-blowing.
Isn't that incredible? A lot of them do the same thing.
I know, and that was the craziest part of it. It was like every single person is like, we specialize in bringing this data, but it's like if all of you do it, you all can't obviously have success in this industry.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest problems at big firms is that they have a lot of siloed softwares that don't talk to each other. And
right.
I broke my brain at my Colorado firm trying to get, accounting to talk to IT to talk to. It was a great title. I was chief innovation officer, but it was also a lot of headache, trying to get those changes implemented. And the cool part was the software. The hard part was actually implementing it and integrating it.
Right. That is the crazy part. And that's really what it's come down to in the software side, from my understanding, is the integration side, the APIs that are available so you can integrate it into every kind of other piece of software that you have.
Right.
And that's what is going to make these softwares successful, if they can adapt as many of those as possible, so they can kind of create that alliance with everybody else.
And I do a little bit of investing. If you don't mind me giving a plug for one of the companies I've invested in, it's called DocuPlayer. And what I love about it, it's very simple software, and you don't really need an API, although it does plug into systems like Clio. And basically what it does is helps, and this gets to why I thought law.com was such a cool thing. But it basically lets the lawyer sort of do a little video on top of the document, sort of. So if I'm doing a contract for you and I say, hey, Jason, this paragraph C-14, it's kind of a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, but basically what it's saying is what you told me to put, that you want this guy to pay this, and then you're going to do that. And that's what that says. And that's tremendously valuable. We're excited to see, both consumers of legal and contract creators will kind of embrace it.
Yeah, I bet that helps the consumer side understand what they're obviously paying that lawyer for way easier. And I've done so many contracts back where I look at it and I'm just like, I don't even know where to start. And you really do just send it to the attorney. You're like, I don't want to read this. I'm sending it to my attorney. This is not what my head is set for.
Yeah, we did a podcast with Is That Even Legal podcast with Bob Sewell. We did a podcast on, you just signed that contract. Did you know what it said? And there's some survey in that podcast that Bob, the host, pulled out. Like 94% of people admit that they've signed contracts that they had no idea what they said.
That's where I feel like the DocuSign process and those other softwares like that, they almost help and speedline the process of the end user not reading the full document.
That's a very good point.
When they click the next, it's like they hover across all the jargon and sign. And that's really it. I've sent so many contracts that I get back within a minute. And I'm like, they literally had no potential to be able to read the entire contract in this minute.
Yeah. And they sign it. And if you don't sign, I just had a legal software that we're signing up on behalf of Davis Miles, and loved the demo, wanted to see the contract, got it in a DocuSign format, and then they're just bugging the snot out of me for weeks. Sign the contract. It's like I haven't had time to read the contract yet.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the funny part about the reminders. I always try to not set the reminders just for that reason.
Oh yeah, I should. Yeah. Well, good for you.
Well, cool. Let's hop into the nitty gritty, and what we came here for is really to learn more about law.com and the origination and how you guys got started. So for everybody listening, Paul was one of the original founders of law.com. So he's really going to give us those insights here on how they got started. So the first question I really have for you is, how did the idea of law.com come together?
That's a great question. And the idea of law.com probably depends on which founder you talk to. But I was in San Francisco. I was working with a big law firm, and I had built their first website, or had their first website built. It was uglier than sin, and but I was starting to get web companies coming to me as a marketing person for a law firm, trying to sell me advertising models or whatever. So I had an idea of what the models were, and then I had a friend that lived here who knew that I was doing that, and he had a law partner who was buying a bunch of internet domains, and he had bought some really great, top, what we call now, top level domains at bargain basement prices, and one of them was law.com. And so my buddy said, "Hey, you want to get in on this? And I got a potential investor, and then the guy's selling us the name, and can we figure out what we would do with it?" So that's how it started. And so I said, sure. And I, named my percentage. And what was great about the way we set it up was that our investor had a company that he had just sold, and he had a bunch of money, but he also still had a building. He still had IT. So it wasn't the typical, we had to bootstrap everything. And so I was able to tell my wife, hey, I have a job, right? I'm a W-2 employee, right? I'm not doing a big risk here, so that was kind of critical for me to be able to bite the bullet. I'm not like you, where just start out and build it. And I had kids. I had a pretty good job that I had to leave, but that so that made it good. It wasn't the same salary I was making in San Francisco, but it was a living wage, and it gave us some comfort. As to what the thing was going to do, I had these advertising models in my head because that's what I'd been sold, and I had some other ideas. But what I loved about one of the founders was this guy named Charlie Davis, and Charlie is one of the reasons why I'm at Davis Miles, because he and I made some money together. He knew what I could do on a marketing front. But Charlie had this really cool concept that really spoke to me, which was basically just access to justice, which is very common and very prevalent now. But the idea that the internet would sort of democratize the law because it would give people access to the content. Now, you got to go way back. This was before LegalZoom. This was before online CLE. This is before you could do legal research over the web. There were legal research companies, but they were basically charging their users by the minute, right?
Yeah.
So we set out to do, and my biggest role was to, create the business engine to start making us money. So I knew a lot of lawyers throughout the Bay Area, throughout, all the offices where my law firm was, which was an international firm. So I built a pretty good network of advertisers. And then we started to partner with sort of some of the rebel companies. Like there was a company out there that was doing legal research over the web, and they were challenging at the time Thomson Reuters, which was just then Westlaw. Thomson didn't own it yet, and Lexis. And instead of having this proprietary model, we wanted to democratize it, where you just do one subscription and all the research you wanted. So we partnered with them, and that partnership was important because I'll tell you that in a bit. But so we developed a beautiful page, and that's one of the things that's really important is presentation and how you look to the market. And then we pitched some very big corporations who were trying to, because it was the internet boom. Everybody was excited. Nobody knew exactly where it was going to go, but everybody wanted to get involved. It's kind of funny to have started a company about the same time that Yahoo started, about the same time that Amazon started. Now you look at Jeff Bezos and you say, what am I doing? I'm advising law firms in Phoenix and he's flying to the moon. That's what. Right. But we we made some pretty good headway, and because it was well laid out, had good stuff, we landed some big advertising contracts. And then the company that we partnered with to do the legal research was decided that they were going to go public. And so we were trying to figure out whether we would go public. And there were four of us and three lawyers and me. And under the going public scenario, two of those guys would just fall off. The new company didn't need them. They wanted me and they wanted Charlie. So that caused some friction among us because, we, on the one hand, we wanted the most money we could get. And on the other hand, we sort of wanted to go as a team.
Right.
Then another kind of side offer we were starting to entertain. And, I basically told them, well, we're entertaining going public with another entity. And people that bought us got on a plane, flew here, and made us a cash offer, which made everybody happy. And, in retrospect, it was probably a double when it could have been a home run. But the company that went public, went up like this. And then the dot-com crash came. And so we don't know where we would have ended up in that cycle. So to have the cash was, it was a good outcome for everybody. But what a wild ride, pitching to investors, getting turned down. And then later, my partner and I created an incubator here in town, and we invested in some other companies and tried to pitch those to investors, some of which turned out okay and some of them didn't. But it was an incredible experience. I mean, that was the time when, Google hadn't even been born yet, right? Yahoo was the big, so it was the Wild West. And, now, you think about how much influence Facebook and Google and Twitter have on the world, TikTok, and Instagram, it's amazing. The one that's amazing to me is LegalZoom, because we had some documents that we were putting out there for free, and we literally conceptualized LegalZoom in a conference room. And we just didn't have all the resources, to implement it, but you could see it coming, and the one thing that's interesting is when we sold to a content company, and we really thought software was probably bigger, or integrating a bunch of softwares that you could get off of law.com. They never embraced that model. And, their prerogative to this day, I think their valuation would probably be double if they would have embraced our model. But, I'm not there anymore, so I can, speak from the sidelines without any controversy.
Well, that's
but they also cover law firms, so I have to say, law.com is fantastic. But I did think that we could have sold some software off that site.
That's super interesting, and that's an amazing, just foundational understanding of law.com. And you said it yourself when the law.com in general, to get that domain, it was like a gold mine in itself, because we look at 3-letter domains in this day and age right now, and it's like, good luck trying to find one that's for sale.
Yeah, and I was lucky because the other 3 founders were here, and I was in the Bay Area. So, as soon as I knew we had, and I don't want to tell you what we paid for it, but it was like embarrassingly nothing. And what's funny is, I'm not saying I'm smarter than them. I was just in a different context, right? So I instantly knew that we already had a great valuation, right? Even if as long as we didn't screw it up, we were going to be fine, right? We didn't have to be geniuses. But I think it was important to get the contracts in and the content up and the way it looked, and to get an investor and get rolling, because that amplified our valuation quite a bit. That rather than just a domain. But you're right. I mean, as soon as I heard, what? You have what? You have law.com. And and I still don't know that they've completely monetized what it's worth. But
Well, I know personally that they actually just recently came out with a completely new strategy within the last 6 months that is pretty similar to local legal authorities, but it's not very similar at all at the same instance.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you that your model is very similar to what I thought of, which was, sell these, only it was, just to be on that property. So it was a lot less sophisticated, but with the same concept of, practice area, geographic area, et cetera. They've gone through that and they've gone away from that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to, try to do what you do.
They're definitely hopping into, I would say, an industry that they haven't been super big in, and they're not marketing themselves correctly right now too. So I'm super interested to see if they have a falling out, because yeah, it's very interesting what they've created and how they're marketing it to the
Well,
public.
I think the interesting thing, and you know more about this than I do, but I would love your thoughts on this sometime. But whenever now that I'm asked, to invest law firm dollars in a website or in a place where my lawyers can be found, I'm pretty skeptical if the traffic doesn't just turn it right back to my lawyer. You know what I mean? I mean, it's one thing to build a landing page and that kind of stuff, but it's another thing to say, here's a piece of land, and I'm going to advertise this piece of land so much that everybody's going to come to that piece of land, and then I'm going to have them go to your little parcel. It's like, does that work? I mean, when I look at the back end of websites and Google Analytics, I don't, those referring sites are never a huge component of the traffic. So, I wonder how that works. I'm always, I always think through, whether I should spend money on directories or, put a bio here, put a bio there, when I'm like, wouldn't my money be better spent just driving people to my own site or driving people right to my telephone?
Right.
How do you feel about that?
So I have heard it from hundreds of attorneys, and I would say my feeling is pretty similar. And what the industry, I think, has been of now is it is this directory industry, but it's a directory industry that's never honed in on how to get one attorney a lead. So they've all created these awesome directories, but at the end of the day, it's a directory that you go to as a consumer, and you are put in front of 40 to 200 attorneys of the same practice, of the same geographic. So it goes down to, if everybody's using a methodology of utilizing the search engines to get consumers to those attorneys, if you have a page that has 20 attorneys on it, half of those attorneys, if not 19 out of 20 of those attorneys, are never going to see a lead from the program. So it's the harder concept of convincing the attorney that they're not. So like our program, essentially, you're convincing the attorney that they're not part of a group. They're the single attorney for that exact practice area and that demographic. And then when we create that capability of search engines to grab consumers to get them to that attorney, we have one attorney that we're bringing it to where I've seen a better rate at leads driven to our attorneys from our directory than I've heard feedback from hundreds of attorneys of other directories. Personally, you can go research reviews about a lot of the directories out there, and some of them you can find 10,000 bad reviews about how they literally have never drove a lead to an attorney ever.
Yeah, and I think that's, the directory model is based on volume, right? You fund it by getting a bunch of lawyers on the directory, which then makes it a lot less valuable for the consumer because, like you just said, the consumer comes in and I'm not going to name a directory, but if everybody's awesome, who's really awesome?
Right.
And then you're like, okay, I guess all these people are awesome. So I'm going to pick 1 out of 20, like you said. And then the other 19 who paid $5,000 to be on the awesome site. You never got a call, and it's a really genius thing because lawyers are very competitive.
Right.
And if you're going to give out an awesome award, then they want to be the awesome one too. And then if you tell them that they won the awesome award, they'll open their wallet. I sometimes think that, if you're pitching your business or I'm pitching my business, I think you start with an award, right? I'm attorney at law, whatever your brand is. It's like, you won. Now give me money. That's not a bad idea, but yeah. So I think that what we struggled with for a revenue model, and that's why I think sometimes software is probably the better answer. Is we struggled at .com to figure out, okay, how do we make it, and kind of landed on a very primitive version of what you did, which is one practice area per geographic area, and what does that mean? What do they get for that, et cetera, and then build on from there.
Right.
But it's been really cool to see how it's evolved.
Right. Well, definitely on that side. And the directory industry, I think, has evolved an insane amount the past 10 years. Because I think there's 180 some legal directories out there.
Yeah.
And really, if you ask a lawyer how many directories are out there, they'd probably say less than 10 from the average attorney's knowledge. So it is kind of an industry that is a lot of people competing, but nobody has figured out, I think, the thing to stay. Because the people that have stayed have not changed their system in 10 years. So eventually their system will get depleted out, I think.
Yeah, there are a couple that I think have found a really interesting niche. And I wouldn't be surprised if people, years and years and years ago, just when American firms were starting to go to Europe, there was a rating service over there that was similar to, at least in my recollection, I could be wrong, but my recollection is it's similar to Martindale, and it's called Chambers and Partners. And so you got the best law firms in the world who are based in New York City or San Francisco or Los Angeles or Chicago, who are going into London, et cetera, and say Tokyo or what have you. And to get credibility, you wanted to get ranked in Chambers because it meant you were a great international firm. And they've set up a system where they really do interview your people. They really do research. So it means something, and there are firms in the country that hire, a $75,000 a year person just to submit to directories. And a major part of that is Chambers, because you have to compile all the work that you did that year. You have to arrange all these people to talk to them and talk to the researchers. Then you have to talk to them and tell them your perspective on other firms. It's a full-time job to have it happen. And if it didn't matter to those big global firms, they wouldn't invest in it. So I do think that there are some that, not kind of the firms that we're necessarily talking about here, but there are some big global firms where that matters. And I've talked to candidates who thinking about making a move, and they won't make a move because that particular firm isn't ranked in Chambers. So there are some of those that are research based.
Right.
And now, how much they get searched, the other thing about that is a sophisticated buyer, do they really go on a Chamber site to search? I know recruiters go on Chamber site to search because they want to see who's Chambers rated, but no, your point's well taken.
Yeah, that's the bigger concept of, if you have the database in your website already, or if you're utilizing search engines to get the data or get the consumers the leads, or get the attorneys the leads, it's completely different. And I would say that a few have that brand, but that is what I always say is, if you're really researching for an attorney of a specific practice, maybe not personal injury is a good example, but like business litigation, you're going to research that attorney heavy. You're going to double check multiple sources online for that attorney. And that's like very vettable to the end consumer when you can find that attorney on multiple sources. So I do agree with you there. And so to hone it back into law.com a little bit here, I had a question that was how you guys really approach the legal marketing industry from the attorney side and the vendor side. The software is kind of approaching it from the vendor side. And then for attorneys, you kind of honed in on the advertising slots for specific law firms. Is that the major way that you guys profited in the beginning off of law.com?
Yeah. It was that was a key component of it. So if you just breaking those down, like, so if you take a look at the lawyer side, lawyers like to generate content generally, and so we would have them write and pay us to put their content up. And it was kind of like the paywall sites of today, where they induce you for free, and then after you do it for a while, you kind of dig it. The challenge that we faced, because the internet was so new, is that we did get takers who wanted to own, and they didn't know what it meant, et cetera. And then and if you sent a link to somebody, you didn't even know if they used the internet yet. So it made any, you know what I mean? If you can even imagine that, right? You can't even imagine it now. But it's like, okay, hey, I posted this on law.com. I'm going to send it to 12 of my contacts and look like I really know what I'm talking about. But 6 of them may not even have the internet yet, right? Or they're that sound of dial-up, that you hear that going on, the background wise. Somebody's trying to look at your article and then they give up because it doesn't load fast enough. Yeah. So the concepts were all there, but the execution was challenging because the internet wasn't, Al Gore ready yet. It was getting there, but it wasn't. Even if the content wasn't that accessible, I mean, that wasn't a major problem, but it was part of one of the hurdles we had to go over. But people were interested in that. So what we tried to do was we tried to do 4 channels, right? We did a channel that was B2B. So it would be lawyer content to business, lawyer content to consumer. Then we had a law school channel, because we saw Amazon starting to come around, and we thought that, we thought we could have all elements of a very successful website. We thought we could have content and sponsored content. We thought we could have softwares, at least partnerships with softwares, and then we thought we could have e-commerce. So the idea with law schools was we started to make relationships with used book sellers, for example. So you could get your law school books for half price or a third off or what have you. And then we would take cuts of the deals that were available on the site. And then the final, so we had a B2B, B2C, and then we had law schools, and then we had just content for lawyers, about lawyers and about the other law firms, et cetera, which is kind of where law.com ended up. Like if you go on there now, it's mostly talking about court decisions and this lawyer and that lawyer, and it covers all over the country. They had about more than 30 properties. Many of them were just print properties, but some of them were already online. And so when they bought us, they started to do a roll up, and their digital strategy was, that all that content would come online, sit behind a paywall, which I think it still does. And but yeah, that was how we went to the lawyers, as we got some accolades. USA Today called us one of the hottest sites at the time. So we used that accolade a lot to tell lawyers, hey, people are going to look at this, And then on the vendor side, hey, lawyers are going to look at this. And, if we can take, that research product that's going to, be half the price of Lexus or a third of the price of Lexus. And you have to tell a funny story that wasn't funny at the time, but nowadays we have email marketing. It's pretty sophisticated. We have all these privacy laws, and we have all these, unsubscribe, and rightfully so. But back in the day, it was kind of the Wild West. So I paid a programmer to write me And I basically gave him, and I don't know where I got it, but a list of like all the lawyers of the country, right? And he was writing me spam code to like tell, hey, I'm Paul Ward, and I'm the vice president of marketing of blah.com, and I'd like you to subscribe because of blah blah blah. I thought it'd be really cool if I put my name on it and put my own email address, and well, he screwed up the programming. And it sent like 10 messages to each person. And I spent like 2 weeks apologizing to all these people who we had spammed. I mean, figured it out about 70,000 emails later. We hadn't gotten to the whole million of the lawyer population, but we got 70,000 or something into it. And I spent weeks, sorry. Luckily, a lot of people didn't open those emails, but lesson learned, and it cured me of ever being a spammer again, right? I didn't ever want to do that again. So
that is funny. Yeah, in this day and age, if somebody gets into your email and starts spamming out, I feel like every single person reaches out to you instantly. Hey, I think somebody hacked into your account.
Like, exactly.
Thank you.
I probably could have been let off in handcuffs, by today's standards, and rightfully so, right? But I was just trying to get the word out, But
that's awesome, though. Well, I'm sure there's still a crazy amount of cold email outreach going out there that's a little bit illegal behind the scenes.
Yeah, probably.
Well, cool. Got a couple more questions before we end up, but I don't want to take too much time here today. But so we heard the foundation of it, and we heard that you sold it. When did you guys actually sell law.com?
It was in 2000, like I think mid-year of 2000. So right before the bubble started to burst, actually. Our timing was perfect. Like I said, we sold, we went on vacation, and then, about 2 or 3, 4 months later, I was lamenting because I was watching the stock of that IPO go up. And I was thinking, and they wanted me right there. So and so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. We hadn't formed Incubate yet. So I'm like, man, if I would have just stayed at first, I still have a job. And number 2, I'd be worth, 3 times what I am right now, and then as the next 6 months played out, it's like, I think I'm okay. I think this is
feeling better.
all right, But yeah, so it was about mid 2000.
That is insane to hear, just that a tech company or an online company was sold in 2000.
Yeah,
because we know that obviously the boom didn't really happen until kind of that 2005 era. But that is just awesome to hear.
Yeah, it was a fun experience, and one of the things I would say as an entrepreneur is, we got a great domain name. I think we did a pretty good job with it. We didn't screw it up. We had a pretty good exit. But when we went into Incubate, we thought we knew a lot more than we really knew, because we'd gotten lucky, and it was a space that I really knew, law firms and lawyers. Incubate, we kind of expanded into things we didn't know, and we screwed up a few, learned the hard way that, you're going to fail. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to fail. And, sometimes it's better to fail on the first one so you don't think you know a lot. But after, I think we started 7 companies, and one of them, barely survived, and one of them did really, really well. And the rest sort of, various stages of failure, or they just petered out, But that was really good to learn, because, you're going to fail. And if you get lucky, the most important thing is to stay humble and not think everything. And then turn around and incubate as an investor. We learned that too, that if just because somebody did great first time doesn't necessarily mean they will. You have to look at why they did great. And there are certain characteristics and traits that people carry through. And there's serial entrepreneurs that they're going to be successful, and you just think, yeah, I'm put my money on it. But then there's others that are sort of more one-hit wonders, and you sort of have to say, okay, wasn't that just a great domain name? You know,
You're right.
what did you really bring to that? You know,
That's the SEO industry at its finest. Is you have so many people out there putting out these case studies of the top attorney that everybody knows in the entire United States, and you're like, well, the attorney's already well known in the entire state. How much did you actually have an impact to that?
Right.
And
Yeah, I bet you battle that all the time. You know.
Oh, exactly. And
but there's also an axiom in marketing with lawyers that's really interesting too. Is that, and I wrote about this in the Bar magazine, Arizona Attorney, this most recent issue about, you know, working with a lawyer who's already super good, because sometimes, you know, and you know this from marketing, if you team up with a savvy company or a savvy lawyer, sometimes 2 + 2 can equal 12, because, you know, they'll do what you suggest, they'll have their own suggestions, and then there's a sort of like alchemy that happens. Like they're already a good marketer, and then you get them together with your brain, and you come up with stuff that really blows it out of the water. Whereas you come out with, if you hook up with somebody who wants to argue with you and wants to fight you, you know, you're like, okay, so your marketing sucked and you hired me, and now you want to argue with me, you know, then 2 + 2 is not, you know, it may barely equal 4, right? And so, you know, you're right. I mean, sometimes you say, wow, look at that guy, got him into the top of the search engine. You say, well, so what? He was already at the top of the search engines. But there are also cases where you say that person already had $1 million in revenue, and now they have $1.7 million in revenue. And, you know, 1.1 million is a good revenue, 1.7 is even better. And that was 2 + 2 = 12. You know?
Right. That's if I can ever find anybody who's in my footsteps, but they've already successfully done the thing that I'm trying to do, you best believe I'm going to learn everything that I can.
Sure. And if you get a customer that thinks like that, you know, it's and I have lots of people that I work with that think like that. They're already super good at what they do, but they know they can be better, and they want a different perspective. And, you know, and I've learned a lot. I mean, you know, I learned my whole LinkedIn game from a lawyer in town. In 2009, he convinced me to get on it. He was getting clients off of it. And I laugh, you know, it's like I've given a lot of lawyers LinkedIn advice, but I learned it from a lawyer.
Yeah, that's super funny. Yeah, learn it and pitch it back to the people that you learned it from.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get him to hire me, give him some tips.
That's awesome. Well, very cool. Thank you for that full story of law.com, and just giving us that full understanding. I have one last bonus question, and it's for all of our listeners here. Every single episode, our goal is to really help the listeners hear what is working here and now in the legal marketing industry. My question to you is, what do you feel is the best form of marketing that attorneys can do today?
That's a great question. And I think I'm going to answer it maybe not in the most direct way that you'd like, but I think the most important thing is to have some kind of a business plan that the marketing underpins. Like you have these goals, and because if you have these business goals and business objectives, then the marketing can get underneath that, and then you can prove that we did this goal for this reason, and it validates a lot of stuff. And I think that omni-channel is really important. Like I cannot underestimate the value of social media. I think a lot of law firms, a lot of lawyers don't understand the value of Instagram and Facebook, and underutilize it. Even TikTok is, there's a law technology company that has a community relations guy, and he does the best TikToks, and he has millions of followers, and he thought it was just a stupid hobby, but he realized it's really helped that software company grow their community. So social media is really important. It can't be a standalone, but it also shouldn't be neglected. I think, PPC and SEO and LSAs. We've had Davis Miles. We have had a lot of success with LSAs.
That's good.
We started doing them in a couple of practice areas and have seen really good hits on those and quality leads. So I think those are really important. And then and back to social and LinkedIn and content and video is huge, and creative video, not just a talking head lawyer. And I think that's one of the things that firms struggle with is, what to put in a video, how to edit a video. But I've seen some amazing lawyers, especially on Instagram, and especially solos, who do, really good videos and put, chunks of really important data. They boil it down to a meme, or they boil it down to 4 points, and then it comes out with some music, and it's just super memorable. And when I started this business, and when I was selling that advertising on law.com, these lawyers would write you 12 pages of stuff about some legal decision, or what the Biden administration did. It wasn't the Biden administration at the time, although I'm sure he was a senator at the time. But there was all this content, and you read to the bottom, sometimes you wouldn't even know, like, so what? All they did was analyze it. They didn't actually give the person a recommendation. What I've seen that works and that a lot of people are doing is, like, Biden comes out with something, or some law gets passed, or some governor decides something. It's just a quick meme, like, this is what it means. Boom, 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 call me. And they do it fun, and they put their personality into it. The other thing that I think works a lot, and lawyers are hesitant to do this, but I've seen it working more, is some of your own personality. I've got, at Davis Miles, we have a marathoner who's also a PI lawyer, and he writes about his runs. And the idea is, like, look, if this guy can last through, 50 marathons, he's gonna stick it through your case. He's gonna be an endurance. He's not gonna quit on you. And I have a friend who does recipes and puts those out. So that sort of, I think that the world is kind of morphing to, they want to know a little bit about you as a person, and not just your professional credentials. And the judgment, which you and I supply, is like, what's that line? What gets too, trivial? It doesn't sound like a sophisticated lawyer.
Right.
And what's too stuffy that people don't even understand it, and they just turn it out. That's the balance that I think we marketers help the lawyers get to. But I think we're going to see video going more. I don't think I don't think email marketing is dead. I think that's still, I find that very effective. Like with our podcast, a lot of the things that we do with our podcast. Oh, and podcasting is another huge thing. What we're doing right now, people love it. People love to be in on the conversation. They love to listen to it. And we have 20,000 downloads on the Is That Even Legal podcast. And
awesome.
Now, the secret to great pay-per-click, the secret to a great podcast is great pay-per-click. You have to have lawyers who are willing to be part of the intake process. In my estimation, and the successful ones I've had great lawyers who roll with the punches, keep their schedules open, make time to do those free consults, and find a way to make money off of it. And with a podcast, you have to have a great host. And I've been blessed with, Bob Sewell is the host of Is That Even Legal? And he's fantastic. He's a journalism undergrad, so he's natural at this. So you can't just, it's like all marketing, right? It's not the tools, it's how you use them.
Agreed. I agree. He is an amazing podcast host. I love the podcast that he puts out and you guys put out, for sure.
And what's funny about him is he's as hilarious in person as he is on that show. And it's just like, you never know where it's going to go, and it's fun.
He is super funny. And I think you answered that question the best that you possibly could, because you really started that out with the business plan being the number one thing, and having marketing express and emphasize that business plan. And that is what I think not a lot of attorneys know. And a lot of attorneys are like, I can start a practice and I can go find a marketer and they can grow this entire business for me. But yeah, if you can have the business plan started marketing should be that 15% piece, is what we always say, to take it to that finish line of what that business plan is.
I mean, even on the soft stuff, like there are still, like, depending on the size of the firm, there are still some things that you do that you can't necessarily measure the exact ROI on.
Right.
But if they are underpinned by a business plan, right? For example, Davis Miles is the largest law firm in the Phoenix East Valley. And some people know that, some people don't. We want to make sure that as many people know that as possible. We also have this law firm that is a big fitness and wellness law firm, right? So when the opportunity came to become, the premier sponsor of the Mesa Turkey Trot, which is a big event in Mesa, it wasn't one of those things where like, well, we're going to get any clients out of it. It was more like, this is exactly who we are. We are the biggest firm. We are wellness fanatics. We'll be able to turn out 15 to 20 people at this event to run and 5 or 10 more to help. And this is who we are. And, whether it will actually turn into clients, I don't know, but it's very easy to put that in a budget when you're like, this is part of our business plan.
Right. And that's where, all brand awareness won't have the ROI, but brand awareness is still very key in every marketing plan, because that is kind of the one marketing thing that you can do that you don't fully know how it ends that result for you. But you could reach out to somebody today, and 2 years in the future, they could reach back out to you because you reached out to them. And it's just a completely different way to think about it. But personality is key too, and you honed in on that and that answer too. And I listen to all these calls that we have for our local legal authorities, the attorneys that approve that we can listen to their calls. And the amount of personality of why the consumer is choosing the attorney that's involved in our calls, let alone, is jaw-dropping to me. So the amount of people that really say, like, I just read this entire bio, this person loves dachshunds, I love dachshunds, I'm going to use them as my attorney. Like, that correlation is like the craziest correlation, but it works. And I hear it all the time. And it really is just like, if you can bring the right personality into your brand, it is game changing for it.
That I'm glad that you said that. And I got to be honest with you, I am an old, stodgy old dude when it comes to that. So it used to be when I read a bio, and it'd be like, and I like long walks on the beach and warm fuzzy puppies, and I'm like, get that stuff out of there, man. That's not professional. But now, like you said, it's like, Jason likes to breed golden doodles and likes to travel when he can to the Oregon coast and preserve, whatever, shellfish or whatever. People dig that. As long as it's authentic and it's real and it's who you are, it's really powerful.
It is. And it is. I think it's only going to get more powerful as we proceed.
Yeah, because it's the differentiator. I mean, and I told my friend that does the cookie recipes, and I went through this cycle with him. He doesn't work at Davis Miles anymore, but he used to, right? So we went back to this event, and he was meeting all these general counsel, and we paid a lot of money to be in front of these lawyers, and he's like talking about cookies, right? And I'm thinking to myself, hey, what are we doing? Why are we talking about cookies here? But I didn't say anything to him. I just let it play out. But lo and behold, people contacted him over the year to ask him about recipes or what was that thing. And he had this niche, And then now when I talk to him, I go, hey, you should post something on LinkedIn about, what you're cooking for the holidays, because people care about that, Right. So I think it is and I look at my own LinkedIn algorithm, the biggest post in 2021 for me was I posted about my motorcycle, my Ducati, and, taking it out in the desert, and what I learned from, buying a Ducati after 20 years of not having a Ducati. And people went crazy. And I was like, I didn't even know. I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't post this. This is just kind of stupid, but it's how I spent the weekend. And I did have these insights based on what I learned from writing it,
Right.
and one of the main concepts was, when you first get a bike that can go off-road and on-road, and you haven't ridden for a while, you tend to go really slow through the rocks and the bumps, which makes the ride a lot more treacherous and dangerous than if you go at regular speed. You have to be aggressive when it's rough. You can't be a wuss and try to avoid every rock or you're going to go down. And I kind of liken that to the innovator's journey, right? That if you concentrate on every rock in the road, you're never going to get to the destination. You gotta power through the bumps. Now, not recklessly, but aggressively and assertively, right?
Right.
And that really resonated with people. I mean, people were like, yeah, exactly. And people who know how to ride better than me were, giving me tips. And I was like, well, and so I'm a believer in it. But it's cool that you've heard that. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about what you do in digital marketing is hearing those call rail calls or whatever the software is and
Call rail.
and seeing how the firm is actually interacting with buyers it's priceless. And that's a really interesting insight that you just shared, that you've heard people connect on the personality issue because something was in the bio about their personal preferences in life. Yeah.
Right. It is wild. And if that can make a consumer go to an attorney, I'm going to tell the attorney to keep emphasizing that as much.
Yeah. As long as it's real and it's authentic. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Long walks on the beach that will never be put on market. Well, Paul, thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm sure all the listeners got some valuable information from you and just really enjoyed hearing your entire story.
Me as well. And, you've got some great insights, and I'm excited. The next generation is in good hands with folks like you, and more than happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Have a great one.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for joining us today for Legal Marketing Station with Jason. We hope you received a valuable legal marketing tip from today's episode. Be sure to leave any comments or questions you have, and stay tuned for future episodes with your host, Jason Craver.